It was a small thing at first, the hum of the refrigerator, the steady rain outside, and the faint reflection of a man in his 40s sitting at his kitchen counter in Boise, Idaho. His name was Ethan Marlowe, and the glow from his phone painted his face in cold light. On the screen, his wife Renee was smiling, the kind of smile that used to mean something. She tilted the camera, showing off a diamond bracelet that caught every bit of light in the hotel room behind her. "Don't worry," she said, her voice slick with champagne. "You'll land on your feet, I did." Then the video ended. 40 seconds. That's how long it took to dismantle an 18-year marriage. Ethan didn't speak, didn't curse, didn't throw the phone. He just set it down on the table next to the stainless steel coffee cup he hadn't touched in an hour. The silence pressed in around him like insulation, heavy, suffocating, unreal. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Somewhere inside, something broke. He looked around the room, the modern furniture she'd insisted on buying, the art prints that meant nothing to him, the kitchen renovation she swore they needed. Everything around him was the result of choices he'd let her make. He'd built a life with Renee, steady, methodical, loyal. But now, watching that glittering bracelet and the hotel suite she wasn't supposed to be in, he realized something. She hadn't just left him, she'd erased him. And yet beneath the ache, a strange calm began to bloom. Because Ethan Marlowe wasn't just a husband, he was an IT systems consultant, a man who lived and breathed patterns, anomalies, inconsistencies. And for months, he'd been watching a new pattern form, one he hadn't wanted to name. The signs had been there, small at first, like static before a storm. Weekend girls' trips that stretched an extra day. Credit card charges in neighborhoods Renee never mentioned. A new perfume he couldn't quite place. Smiles she saved for her phone. He'd asked once, half-heartedly, if everything was okay. Her laugh, light, dismissive, had been answer enough. But Ethan's instinct for detail wouldn't sleep. He started collecting pieces, not accusations. Bank statements, credit logs, travel receipts. He kept them in a folder in the bottom drawer of his office desk, the kind of folder a man only builds when hope has already started to die. While Renee had been drinking champagne, Ethan had been building his firewall. 4 months earlier, he'd quietly restructured their finances. When his company, Cloud FIT, landed a big contract, he'd opened a secondary LLC account for liability reasons, or so he told her. In truth, it was a safeguard. On paper, they had one shared retirement portfolio. In reality, 70% of their assets sat behind business accounts she never bothered to read. She'd signed everything without a glance. She trusted him, not because she loved him, but because she was bored by the details. "You handle the boring stuff, honey," she used to say. "I just want to live." And that was exactly what she'd done. She lived. Dinners, parties, new dresses. The trainer who texted at midnight. Ethan built spreadsheets. Renee built illusions. The night she recorded that video, she thought she'd beaten him, but she hadn't realized she was playing a man who'd already drawn the blueprint of her downfall. At 10:07 p.m., Ethan picked up his phone again, not to reply, but to act. He called the bank. "Yes, this is Ethan Marlowe. I need to report a fraudulent attempt to liquidate our retirement account." The woman on the other end hesitated. "We were about to call you, Mr. Marlowe. There's been unusual activity." He almost smiled. "Freeze it," he said, effective immediately. When the call ended, the house felt different. Still empty, still cold, but now secure. For the first time in months, Ethan could breathe. He walked into his home office, the room where he'd quietly prepared for this moment. He opened his folder, reviewing everything one last time. The signatures she'd forged, the transfers she couldn't explain. The list of accounts she didn't even know existed. This wasn't revenge, this was containment. He sat back, staring at the city lights flickering beyond the window. Every light out there represented another life, another story. And somewhere among them, Renee was laughing in a hotel room she thought he'd never see. He whispered to himself, almost gently, "Wise decision." Then he closed the folder and began filling out his divorce documents. Fields he'd left blank for months now finally had dates, evidence, purpose. He didn't sleep that night, but he didn't need to. Some kinds of peace don't come from rest. They come from certainty. 4 days later, the doorbell shattered the quiet. Ethan opened the door to find Renee standing on the porch in the same designer coat she'd worn in the video. Only now it was wrinkled, her makeup smeared. Her eyes were red, her composure gone. "What did you do?" she snapped. "The bank froze everything. I can't access our accounts." Ethan stood still, one hand on the doorframe. "I reported unauthorized withdrawals," the bank agreed. She pushed past him, perfume trailing the faint scent of panic. "Unauthorized? I'm your wife, Ethan. I have every right." "Not when you forge my signature on a joint withdrawal form." For a moment, her face went blank, mask slipping, before she let out a hollow laugh. "You can't prove that." He stepped closer, voice quiet. "The bank can, and I have your video, the one where you bragged about emptying our retirement." The laughter died. Her shoulders tightened, her tone softened. "Ethan, I wasn't thinking clearly. It's James. He's not who you think. I just needed—" "You needed money," Ethan interrupted, "and you thought you'd found a shortcut." She reached for his arm. He stepped back. "You've been planning this for months, Renee, packing your favorite clothes, moving pieces out one by one." Her voice cracked. "We can fix this." "No," he said. "You can hire a lawyer." And just like that, the 18-year marriage ended, not with shouting, not with tears, but with silence. As she stormed out, she turned at the door, eyes full of venom. "You'll have nothing without me. You were just a boring IT guy before I made you look successful." Ethan almost smiled. "And yet somehow the boring IT guy outsmarted you." She froze. "The retirement had over $800,000. "It had 180, he said. "The rest was moved, months ago, into accounts you signed off on but never watched." For the first time, true fear flickered across her face. "You planned this?" "I protected us," Ethan said simply. "Turns out it also protected me from you." The door closed softly behind her. The rain had started again. 3 days after Renee's confrontation, the storm outside Boise hadn't stopped. The clouds hung low, thick, and unmovable, just like the weight in Ethan's chest. But inside his office, everything was orderly. Folders lined the desk in perfect rows, bank statements, screenshots, transaction histories. Every number told a story, and Ethan was fluent in the language of data. That morning, he made a call to Jack Malone, a forensic accountant he'd worked with 2 years ago on a corporate fraud case. Jack was methodical, cynical, and brutally efficient, the kind of man who could find a missing cent in a $1 million scheme. "I need you to trace some financial activity," Ethan said. "Personal, not business, and I'll need everything documented for court." Jack didn't ask for context. He didn't need to. He'd heard that tone before, the voice of a man past anger, past grief, operating purely on precision. 2 days later, they met in Jack's downtown office, sterile, glass-walled, the kind of place where truth and numbers stripped away sentiment. Jack had already done his homework. He slid a folder across the desk. "Small withdrawals at first," he said. "Always under $10,000. Always just below your bank's fraud threshold. Then about 8 months ago, it accelerates." Ethan opened the folder. Rows of statements highlighted in yellow, dates, amounts, merchant codes, restaurants, boutiques, jewelry stores, and then transfers. Each transfer led to a name he didn't recognize: James Whitaker. "He's a regional manager for a company called Voxen Audio," Jack continued. 41, divorced twice, financially unstable, history of relationships with women in pharmaceutical sales, your wife's field. Ethan's jaw tightened. So she wasn't his first. "Not even close," Jack said. "This guy's been running the same playbook for years. Charm, emotional intimacy, small gifts. Then he convinces them to invest or loan money. 2 of them filed for bankruptcy, 1 divorced quietly. No criminal charges, but the pattern's there." Ethan flipped through the pages. $87,000 siphoned from their accounts, and nearly $20,000 of it wired directly to Whitaker's bank. The final page listed the timeline, every deposit, every purchase, every lie Renee had told wrapped in financial evidence. Ethan sat back in silence. He didn't feel rage, only clarity. The affair wasn't just betrayal, it was orchestration. Whitaker wasn't a lover, he was a predator. "You think she knew?" Ethan asked quietly. Jack leaned forward, tapping the folder. "Maybe not at first, but eventually she had to notice where the money was going. Whether she's complicit or just blind, either way, she's part of it." Ethan closed the folder. "Then let's make sure the law sees it the same way." That night, Ethan didn't go home right away. He sat in his car overlooking the city, rain cascading down the windshield, headlights slicing through the blur. He thought about Whitaker, the man who'd seen his wife not as a partner but as a mark. In another life, Ethan might have gone after him in person. But this wasn't a movie, and he wasn't a man who fought with fists. His weapons were logic, documentation, timing. He remembered what Jack said. This isn't his first rodeo. That meant there were others. Other women, other trails, other bank logs. He wasn't just protecting himself now, he was building a case. The next morning, Ethan met with his lawyer, Daniel Green, the kind of man whose calm could quiet a hurricane. Daniel read the folder page by page, while the clock ticked softly between them. When he finished, he removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "This changes everything," Daniel said. "We're not just talking about divorce anymore. We're talking about fraud, conspiracy, and possibly a financial crime ring." Ethan nodded. "I don't want revenge, I want accountability." "Then we'll build it," Daniel said. 3 paths. 1, we use this for leverage. Settle quickly, recover assets, keep it civil. 2, we file criminal charges. 3, we coordinate with Whitaker's previous victims for a joint action. I'd recommend starting with leverage, then tightening the screws. For a long moment, neither spoke. Rain drummed against the window like a metronome. "You know," Daniel added, "most people in your position want to destroy their ex. You just want to finish this. That's rare." Ethan stared out at the gray sky. "I've already lost what mattered. The rest is just numbers." Over the next week, Ethan's life became a rhythm of quiet action. He turned over the evidence to the bank's fraud department, attaching every document Jack had compiled. He sent an anonymous tip to Voxen Audio's corporate compliance office. "Check your regional manager's financial conduct." He changed locks, passwords, and backup authentication keys. Every detail was precise, deliberate, surgical. Then he waited. He didn't text Renee, didn't answer her calls, didn't even open the messages that stacked up in his inbox like ghosts. Until one night, her tone changed from anger to fear. "We need to talk. I think I made a mistake. There are things about James you don't understand." He forwarded every message to Daniel without reading the rest. 2 days later, she found him in the lobby of his office building, pale, trembling, her eyes swollen. "He's not who I thought he was," she whispered. "James has been lying about everything." Ethan's face didn't change. "Seems to be a pattern. I just found out from one of his exes. He's done this before. Used women, taken their money." "I know," Ethan said softly. "So does my lawyer, so does the bank, so does his employer's compliance department." Her lips parted in shock. "You knew?" "I traced every dollar," he said, "all 87,000 of them. We've connected him to 2 other victims. The investigation's already moving." Renee swayed slightly, as if the floor beneath her had cracked open. "Ethan, I didn't know. You have to believe me." He looked at her, really looked at her, and realized the love he once felt had transformed into something quieter, colder, but strangely freeing. "I don't have to believe anything anymore," he said. "That's the one thing I finally learned." He turned and walked away. Behind him, she began to cry, but Ethan didn't look back. Some lessons are only learned by walking away from the fire you built yourself. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished floors. Ethan sat beside Daniel at the plaintiff's table, his evidence binder stacked neatly before him. Across the aisle, Renee and James sat together. She looked diminished. He looked restless, annoyed. The judge entered, silver hair, calm authority. "Before we begin," she said, "the plaintiff has submitted additional evidence regarding financial misconduct." Daniel stood, crisp and composed. "Yes, Your Honor. Documented fraud, forged authorizations, and the transfer of marital assets to a third party." He handed over the binder. Inside, bank statements. The video of Renee's confession. Transfers to Whitaker's account. Testimonies from Whitaker's 2 previous victims. The courtroom grew silent. Renee's eyes welled up. Whitaker's jaw tightened. The smirk he'd worn all morning flickered and vanished. When the judge turned her gaze on him, the air thickened. "Mr. Whitaker," she said sharply, "this court has evidence suggesting a repeated pattern of financial exploitation. While this is not the primary matter today, I am referring these documents to the district attorney's office for further investigation." Whitaker leaned toward his lawyer, whispering urgently, but there was no escaping now. The judge continued. Given the evidence, I am freezing all disputed assets pending final resolution. And Mrs. Marlowe, the court takes a very dim view of attempts to conceal or transfer marital property. The gavel struck once. It was over. Not cleanly, not painlessly, but finally. For the first time in a year, Ethan felt the weight leave his chest. 6 months later, Boise's skyline shimmered under a pale gold sunset. Ethan stood on the balcony of his new condo, a mug of black coffee in his hand. From up here, the city looked smaller, calmer, as if all the noise had finally settled. The divorce was finalized, the financials audited, the chaos contained. Renee's lawyer had folded fast once the fraud documentation surfaced. In exchange for partial cooperation with the district attorney's office, her criminal exposure was reduced. She'd avoided jail, but the price was steep. Restitution payments, probation, and a public record of willful participation in financial misconduct. Whitaker wasn't so lucky. With 3 former victims testifying, plus the bank's fraud division and Ethan's forensic evidence, his case had become a spectacle. Fraud, forgery, exploitation. The headlines read like justice set to print. Ethan didn't attend the hearings. He didn't need to watch another downfall. He'd already lived through one. Sometimes the best revenge isn't ruin, it's distance. That night, as the last of the sun disappeared, he thought about how strange peace could feel after war. It wasn't joy, it wasn't relief, it was just quiet. And that was enough. Inside the condo, Ethan kept only one photograph from his old life, tucked in a slim black frame on a bookshelf. It showed him and Renee on their honeymoon, smiling under the Maui sun, sand between their toes, the promise of a lifetime reflected in the waves behind them. He didn't keep it for nostalgia. He kept it as a reminder that trust once earned must be maintained, not assumed. He'd replayed the entire story in his mind countless times, searching for the moment things had gone wrong. But truthfully, it hadn't been one moment. It had been a series of them. Moments when he'd ignored the small alarms, thinking love was stronger than patterns. He realized now, love wasn't about ignoring data. It was about seeing clearly and choosing anyway. The new condo felt lighter. His design, his furniture, his rhythm. No curated aesthetic to impress anyone. Just clean lines, quiet walls, and a small desk where he worked late into the night, consulting for clients who trusted his precision. Ironically, his business had grown during the chaos. Corporate clients admired his resilience. One CEO had even said, "If you handled your personal storm that calmly, I want you managing my systems." He laughed, but there was truth in it. Crisis had sharpened him. Sometimes the storms that destroy us also strip away everything false, and what remains is the version of ourselves we were always supposed to be. One evening, as the city lights flickered on, Ethan's phone buzzed. A message from Andrea, a project manager he'd met on a consulting job. Smart, honest, grounded. "Still on for dinner?" she texted. "Looking forward to it," he replied. Simple, uncomplicated, no hidden meaning, no performance. Andrea wasn't a replacement. She was proof that the world still held people capable of genuine connection, people who didn't build love on manipulation or money. When she arrived that night, she brought wine. Not expensive, just thoughtful. They cooked together, laughing at burnt garlic and arguing gently over recipes. It wasn't fireworks, it was better. Steady warmth. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen, not as a provider, not as a system, but as a man. And that quiet, unexpected tenderness was the truest luxury of all. Weeks later, Ethan walked along the riverfront, the crisp autumn air brushing against his coat. The world had kept moving. People jogging, couples holding hands, a little boy chasing pigeons near the water. Life relentless and beautiful in its indifference. He thought about everything he'd lost and what he'd learned. He'd learned that betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's disguised as routine. That strength isn't in revenge, but in restraint. That survival isn't about winning. It's about understanding when to walk away. And most importantly, he learned that love, like finance, requires oversight, transparency, ongoing accountability. Not as a transaction, but as a practice of respect. He paused at the railing, watching sunlight scatter across the river's surface, and said quietly, to no one in particular, Trust isn't something you give, it's something you maintain. And the moment you stop maintaining it, it starts to expire. He smiled then, a small, private smile. For the first time, it felt genuine. The past was no longer a wound, just a scar, and scars were proof of healing. He turned, walking back toward the city lights, coat fluttering behind him, the night air clear and alive. And as the music swelled, low, warm, forgiving, the screen faded to black.